All right, so we'll go ahead and get started as people start trickling in. Hello, everyone, and welcome again. My name is Marlene Linares Gonzalez. I am the Communication and Outreach Coordinator at the Latin American and Iberian Institute here at the University of New Mexico in Albuquerque. And we're honored and excited today for our workshop, our first workshop of the semester, and for all of you for joining us here this Friday afternoon. We all know that you're busy and have a lot to do, and Zoom fatigue is very real. So we really appreciate you joining us this afternoon. Oops. All right, so first I just wanted to go over the kind of the agenda for the afternoon today. So we'll do a quick round of introductions to just kind of see who's joining us this afternoon. And then I will introduce our guest today, Alejandra Domenzain, who will be kind of talking about her book For All Paratodos. And so we'll have a reading and discussion with her. And then we'll go into some of the classroom guides and curriculum that we've created as a team here at the LAII that's related to the same themes that are relevant to the book that Alejandra wrote. And then we'll close it out with some questions from everyone and another discussion. And then we'll close for the evening so we can all get to our weekends. All right, so I'd like everyone to unmute themselves and hopefully show their cameras if they can, or but please at the very least put it in the chat box. But we'd love to know for those of us who are in the room, your name, where you teach, excuse me, and what might have drawn you to the workshop. I'm going to just go down the list of attendees that I can see. Let me just open up this list a little bit bigger. Oh, I'm sorry about that. How about we start with, well, let's start with the LAII team. How about Emmy goes first?
Hi, everyone. My name is Emmy Tither. I am the K-12 Education Program Coordinator at the Latin American and Iberian Institute. I started last month, and so I'm very excited to be working with the LAII in making curricular materials, excuse me, and planning workshops to help serve educators in New Mexico and beyond. Thanks so much for being here. And I'll popcorn it over to Whitney.
Okay. Hi, I'm Whitney. I am in my first year of the Masters in Latin American Studies program at UNM, and I'm a graduate assistant with the LAII K-12 outreach program. So I'm new as well. I'm really excited to be here. And then Alejandra, I'll let you go.
Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be with you today. My name is Alejandra Domenzain, and you'll have a chance to hear a lot from me later, but it's just such a privilege to be in a room with educators that care about these topics. I'm really excited.
How about Sandra? Can you unmute yourself, or maybe not?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm driving.
That's okay.
So, yeah. I'm from Baltimore, Maryland. I'm a 7th and 8th grade teacher at a private school in Maryland.
Perfect. Thank you so much for joining us, Sandra. And Paula?
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, hi, Paula Placencia from Des Moines, Iowa, and I am the Community and Cultural Liaison Advisor. I'm interested in this workshop because we need to have more diversity within our reading material as also our curriculum. And I love visiting your campus when I was there about 4 years ago. So love New Mexico.
Thank you, Paula. I moved here from Iowa City about 3 years ago. So
oh, okay.
Yeah. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Justine?
Yes, hi. Oh, I'm sorry. Hold on. I can't. Oh, yes. There you go. Hi. I'm not an educator per se. I am actually a writer, a children's book writer, among other things. And I know Alejandra from our Manzanito workshop, our writer's workshop. And so I didn't realize this was a workshop for educators. So hopefully I'm not intruding into a workshop. So, but I'm very interested in the topic and also would like to focus on activism and social justice in the books that I write. So I'm very happy to be here.
Yes, thank you. Not intruding at all. Yeah, we invite everyone to join us. Yeah. Lex.
Hi, everyone. I'm not an educator yet. I'm actually a student at the University of North Texas, but I'm studying to be an ESL elementary teacher. And my professor actually offered this course as a way for us to kind of just educate ourselves a little bit on our own time and get some better resources from actual educators.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us, Lex. Jenny.
I'm not a teacher either. I just, I work for Catholic Charities here in Santa Fe, and we do immigration work, and I'm very interested in immigration and in activism. And so I just thought I would join in as well and listen in.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jenny.
Thanks.
Anna.
Hi, everyone. Anna. I'm joining in from Unidos US. I work with our affiliate relations team, so I'm not an educator, but very interested in the topic.
Thanks for joining us, Anna. Sumaya.
Hello, my name is Sumaya. I'm a student at UNT, so I'm not an educator just yet, but I do plan on becoming one. And I'm also here because my professor told me about this workshop, and I'm excited to learn.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us, Sumaya. Marta, I saw that you just joined us. We're just introducing ourselves with your name, where you teach, if you're currently teaching, and what drew you to this workshop.
Hi, yeah, I just found out about it a little online a few days ago, and I teach Spanish heritage courses and felt like these are topics that I would like to embrace and teach this year and coming up. So I was interested in joining.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Martha. Alma, if you'd like to introduce yourself, or just saying if our names, where we teach, if we currently are teaching, and what drew you to the workshop.
Sorry, I'm late. I got out of work a little bit later.
No worries at all. We're just getting started.
So I'm Alma Hernandez. I work for East San Jose Elementary. This is my first year at public education. So I'm very excited to be there. Prior to that, I did private private preschool for 6 years. So I thought this was just a great workshop since I'm working with the bigger range of students. So I think it's going to be great.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us, Alma. Okay, so we'll move on to the next part. So first I wanted to just kind of talk a little bit more about what the Latin American and Iberian Institute at UNM does. So the LAII is committed to expanding awareness, knowledge, and understanding of Latin America and Iberia among diverse constituents. As part of that commitment, the LAII strives to create a stimulating and supportive environment for K-12 educators so they can produce, enhance, and expand knowledge of Latin America within their classrooms. And to this end, we work with educators across grade levels and subject areas and regions, providing them with some of the following resources. So professional development workshops, as we're doing, we're all joining today. We have a book blog called Vamos a Leer, where we post regular reviews and pairing curriculum for books related to Latin America that you can incorporate into the classroom. We have a slew of resources on our on the LAII website, which is laii.unm.edu. We have several curriculum packages, both like long and short, depending on what kind of fits within your capacity at your particular school. We have lending resources. So we have several sets of classroom book sets. So those book sets include specifically just kind of a classroom size library of the same book if you'd like to start a lesson related to a book. And then we also have some thematic book sets as well that you can check out for your classroom. And one of the book sets that we will soon be acquiring is one for Paratodos, Alejandra's book. So if you're interested in checking those books out, you can contact me. I will include my information in the chat. But unfortunately, that resource is only limited to those who are within the Albuquerque metro area. However, all the rest of the resources are available on our website. We also have an educator newsletter. I'm not sure how many of you found out about this workshop through the newsletter, but if you're interested in signing up for that newsletter, if you're not already, please include your email in the chat. I'll save the chat at the end of today's workshop, and I'll get you all added to that as well. All right, so now for the star of the show, I'd like to introduce, I'm very proud to, Alejandra Lowenstein. She grew up in New Mexico and the United States and has been an advocate for immigrant workers for over 25 years and also worked as an elementary school teacher. And she's currently dedicated to improving workplace health and safety for low-wage workers. And today she will be discussing her book, For All Paratodos. And I'm just going to read the brief summary about the book. A young girl named Flor and her father are driven to leave their country for the promise of a land called For All. When Flor comes to understand the deep impact of their immigration papers, she picks up her green pen and writes from the heart, telling the story of immigrants who have been excluded from justice for all. She inspires others to speak up and take action in the hope that their new country will live up to its ideals. A timely bilingual story written in musical rhyme, beautifully illustrated, calling children to compassion and courage. It's a wonderful book. And with that, I will pass it along to Alejandra and let her speak a little bit. So thank you all.
Thank you, Marlene. I just wanted one clarification. I grew up in the old Mexico, not New Mexico, and in the US.
Oh, I'm sorry, did I say New Mexico? I'm sorry.
You're very New Mexico oriented, obviously. No, but thank you. Thank you so much for that really warm introduction. And I think we're going to just jump right in. And so we wanted to start giving you just a little taste of the book as a grounding, since we're going to be talking about it later. And so when the story starts out, you see a young girl named Flor and her father having the conversation about why they need to leave their land. I think that's a very painful decision, everything that they need to leave behind. But their land cannot sustain them. And so they go and they make this dangerous journey. Go to the next one, please. And when they cross the border, they're given these papers with a big red X. And we don't really know what it means. And the father kind of hides it from Flor because he wants to protect her. And so we see Flor's journey to, in this new land and adapting school and learning the language. This scene is actually, I've realized it hits a lot of chords with people. I remember when I moved to the US in the middle of first grade, one of the big deals for me as a kid was my lunch. It just felt wrong. And come to find out, that's a very common experience with a lot of kind of immigrant kids. And so, that journey is a hard one as she's adapting. Next one, please. And she has a fortune, though, of meeting a teacher who just, really sees her and really understands. She has a similar background and kind of sees that she has a story to tell and that this is the way, right, that she was going to kind of find her voice and find her strength. And so she gives her the gift of a green pen and tells her, write your story, write others, write what you want people to know. However, she, as she is, trying to make her way, she and her father are both facing these obstacles that come back to these papers with the red X. And so the father finally kind of sits her down to explain what they mean, that they are undocumented and what the consequences of that are. Next one, please. So Flor is really motivated. She doesn't, I think there's a lot of books now that are about just the immigrant experience kind of up to this point. But what I'm hoping to contribute with this book is this part, which is where you see kind of an an immigrant herself, a young person, questioning and saying, so there's this policy that's really harmful. Can it be changed? And if so, how? And so she uses her green pen, she writes her own story, she starts talking to other people to understand a common experience. Next one, please. And she becomes this advocate, this real advocate, this organizer for, humane and just policies for immigrant workers and immigrant youth. And at the end, you even see the dad kind of coming around and getting motivated. Because previously, he had told her that I can't speak up as an undocumented worker because it's just too risky. And so you see that he even starts, learning about his rights and joining in.
Thank you so much, Alejandra. So what I'll do is I'm going to ask you just kind of some generic questions, and then we'll open it up to the audience, and then just kind of engage a dialogue with Alejandra here. So firstly, what inspired you to write Paratodos?
So I think this is one of those cases where I wrote the book that I wanted to see in the world that wasn't there already. And what I wanted was a book that was for children, at their level, but that really talked about immigration policy and labor rights currently. So the reason I care about that is I've actually been a workers' rights advocate for over 20 years. And so I've had just this privilege to be, up close to these incredible organizing campaigns and victories. And, they don't really make it to the headlines usually, let alone to the classroom. But they're so amazing to me and they're so historic. And so I was also a teacher and had that frustration, right, of knowing there's this vibrant movement out there that's one of the defining movements of our time. And yet it's not really reflected in something that I can bring to start a discussion with my students. The same thing for immigration rights, the same way that undocumented and immigrant workers have been at the forefront of that movement. We see a lot of immigrant young people that have change the course of our immigration policy, right? They're the ones whose sacrifice and leadership got us DACA. If we get immigration reform in this administration, it's going to be because of them as well. And so I really wanted to provide a resource, a tool for educators, for librarians, for families, for advocates, to have a kind of an on-ramp for some of these discussions and to have a way to address it. And I always conceived of it as kind of a resource for educators. So there's a section in the back that's about the issues and there's discussion questions. And I think it's also kind of a love letter to those immigrant activists that are, out in the streets and changing history. And I think it matters. I think it matters that we represent them because that's what our young people are going to see. They're going to see that it's a reality. It's something that they can join. And it's also invites them to think about, what do I care about? What policies do I think are unfair that I want to change? And we need that, right? We need that in a healthy democracy. That's what we do as educators, right? We prepare kids to be civic actors. And that's our whole process, from being informed about the issues, having an educated opinion, being able to express it, to have productive dialogue, to examine systems and policies, to take collective action, et cetera. So that's what I was hoping to contribute. And then just one more thing about, having it be bilingual, that we're a multilingual country. There's no official language in the United States. And, at least a fifth of us speak other languages at home. In some of the bigger cities, it's half of families. And so that is really important, not just for the access, but just also for the representation. I think when I get asked, why did you choose to make it bilingual? I always want to turn it around and say, well, maybe we should ask people who publish books in one language only. Why did you choose to limit it? So I thought that was important to me as well.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. What makes Floyd and her dad belong to For All?
Oh, it's such a powerful question, because really, if you think about it, what you're asking is who is an American? Who is a citizen, right? And I guess, we have to start with be clear that this country was founded on attempted genocide of the original inhabitants, and then colonial acquisition of lands, and I guess you could say forced immigration for slavery, and then welcoming a lot of immigrant labor to kind of extract their labor, but not really giving them full, civic participation. And that continues until today. We still have so many immigrants and refugees that come here as a direct result of this country's economic and foreign policy. So who is American and who belongs is actually really complex. But there's a little, so I want to read just one little section of the book. This is where Flor has studied for, to go to the school of her choice. And then she gets there and this is what she faces. When she got to the school, she saw a big sign. If your papers have check marks, go stand in that line. If they have a red X, that means you should go. We cannot accept you. The answer is no. The guard said, I know your test score was great, but the orders I have say don't open the gate. If you were born here, then you belong. If you are not, you'll always be wrong. Our grandparents weren't born here. Yes, that is true, but we must draw the line, and we draw it at you. So it's kind of like there's a little bit about this hypocrisy, right? Like all of us that are Native Americans, our families came here at some point, but it's, and then some are trying to like shut the door. So I think for me, Flor and her father belong the way that millions of immigrants belong, because they are just part of our communities. They're part of the fabric. They're part of our workforces, our schools, our faith groups, our artistic communities. And frankly, a lot of times there are leaders in our hope and our future. And I think that's what makes you a citizen, not whether you're granted or denied paperwork. And so I think that was something really important to me to express, that when Flor becomes an activist and an organizer in the book, she does it out of love for her country, out of a sense of belonging and of loyalty and pride. So I think especially in the last administration, there was this kind of, and even now, this kind of branding of social justice advocates as, or anyone even who's like critical of our systems or institutions as unpatriotic or divisive. But I think it's the opposite. I think those that really believe in the ideals of this country and are willing to work really hard to make them real, and mostly really selflessly, because you're not going to see the fruits of your labor most likely, right? But you actually believe it, right? This is, you don't control where you're born or what body you're in, but you control what you stand for, right? And those that do that, I think that's one of the greatest like resources and gifts that we have in this country. And we have to see ourselves that way also. Like we're all part of different subcommittees, but what I think we've lost a sense of like a common good in this very polarized political climate. And we need that, right? Like if immigrant workers are not protected, that affects all workers and affects our economy, right? If millions of families of NP are being ripped apart and get dehumanized and excluded, that's a problem for all of our democracy and our society. So that's why I think, in the book, Flor and her dad belong, and they really stand for like all of our immigrant communities.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. I'm wondering, I know I'm kind of gearing away from these questions, but I also have the question of just in terms of the accessibility of the literature, like when you were reading it, just like the cadence of the rhyming and the illustrations are really accessible. I'm wondering if like that, if there is like an importance to that or just like an intention towards that, I guess that's a better word, in terms of making it accessible to children, of course, or to this level, but also maybe even to other folks like parents or educators or anything like that?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I think I've heard that, already when you have a bilingual book, it helps you have kind of multi-generational access, if you have a family that is a multilingual family. And also, I deal a lot with immigrant workers who have low literacy levels as well. And I was also a volunteer adult educator as well. And so sometimes my students would be, these amazing immigrant workers who are incredibly smart and incredibly experienced, but it's just that they hadn't had a lot of formal education. But I had to bring the books about the teddy bears and, things that were not really relevant to them just because that's where they were at in their literacy level. But hopefully what this book does is combine, the more accessible language with, a little bit more of the more like deeper, broader issues that, for those students or for those adults that can access that, it's kind of a little on-ramp to that as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, okay, thank you. Thank you so much. So why was it impactful or important that Flora shared her story with others?
Yeah, so I think, in my experience that there's many ways to get to social change and many things are necessary. So of course, at the core, it's always you need to build power, right? So that people are at the table, that their voices heard, that their needs are met. And then that leads to kind of changing the policies and the institutions and the systems. But I think part as well that's maybe just as important and sometimes needs to happen before is kind of a narrative shift or a culture shift. So, if you see immigrants as a burden and a threat in this dehumanized masses, that's going to lead to a certain set of policies. And if you see them as individuals with, largely situations beyond their control, and they're following like the most basic human impulse to survive and provide a future for their family, who are incredibly talented and courageous, and have so much right to contribute and deserve like a just and dignified process to having a life with full rights and full dignity, then you're going to end up with different policies. So Flor in the book, she really believes in this power of storytelling to change the narrative and to bring about this cultural shift. And in the book, she has faith in people and people's morality and in their compassion, that if they hear stories and they connect to that humanity, they will do the right thing. And I think that's how social change works. I think you need the statistics and you need the really reasonable arguments, but I think art is incredibly powerful because if you do it right, I think you get in touch with something that's like really powerful and part of the human experience, and you're able to invite others in to an experience. And, you don't tell them what it means or what to think, because that's just like lecturing and propaganda, and that doesn't work. I think you create this experience that is moving, and that they will make their own connections, they will draw their conclusions, but they'll come out a little bit different on the other side. And so that, sometimes a book or a mural or a song, can do the work of, 85, political declarations and policies. So I think art has a really important role to play. And I was really glad that you guys included that in your lesson plan, because that is just so powerful, right? To consider all the ways that the art in our communities can communicate so much and can really move people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just like emphasizing that there are different media, right? That we can kind of send the same message, of course. Yeah. Thank you. How do we see immigrant rights intersect with workers' rights in For All? I know that you've spoken about it already kind of broadly, but just within the literature and broadly as well, if you want to touch on that.
Yeah, so that's really, really important. I mean, this has been like my career. So I've just seen it up close, in theory, on paper, there's a lot of rights that immigrant workers have. But in reality, what happens is if they speak up, if they ask for a mask, if they ask for protection from harassment, they ask for a reasonable workload, they risk everything. I mean, and it's just like, I don't want to be over dramatic, but I just don't think you can be over dramatic about it. I think we just normalize it. But if you dare to say anything, you can lose your home, your family, your children, your career, your whole entire life, and maybe be sent to a place that is dangerous, where you may not even know anyone or know the language anymore. I mean, the stakes just couldn't be higher, right? And so that's what happened. In the case of the dad, I'll read you one little section, which is what the dad is explaining what the Red X means for him. So he says, this is the deal. This is basically the deal that they made when they crossed the border. The rules are subjected to. You can pick the strawberries or pounds of tomatoes, clean up the bathrooms, and fry the potatoes. You can't get more money or work without paying. You'll get into trouble if you dare to complain. If you do, guards will come. In no time at all, we can have you locked up and removed with one call. So that is what they face. And, in my experience working with domestic workers, day laborers, garment workers, farm workers, janitors, this is the reality. This is the reality that they feel they're between a rock and a hard place. They have a lot that they might be supporting a family here, a family in their home country. And so it's very hard to talk about labor rights without a path to citizenship. So again, I feel like we just kind of normalize it. There's just millions of people in the situation. And so there's all these kind of predatory employers who, benefit from that. And we don't really have the political will to change it. We have these labor agencies that are supposed to protect workers, but they're underfunded, they're understaffed, they're kind of largely irrelevant. And if you've been following what's happening in the immigration reform movement, like now as we speak, who's in the Capitol, who's marching, who's out in the streets, who's having the meetings with the White House and the elected officials, some of the organizations in the forefront of that are the labor rights organizations, the National Domestic Workers Association, the National Day Labor Organizing Network, the United Farm Workers, CHIRLA, right? Because of that intersection. So if you're an immigrant worker, you're never going to be protected until you're safe from employers, holding that over you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And the last question, the question of the hour, what is the difference in your opinion between an activist and an organizer?
Yeah, I think the way that I see it is, you can be an activist kind of on your own, right? And you can, especially for those that, do it skillfully, you can inspire other people, you can influence others. If you have ways to use your voice and your platform for a message, you can be an activist for what you believe in. And you may be heard or not, you may have an impact or not, right? But you're doing your part, you're being an activist for something. Whereas I think an organizer, that depends on actually working collectively with others to build power. And so what you're trying to do is change the equation to be at the table, to have a say, to hold structures of power accountable, right? So you're changing kind of the power dynamic in the landscape. And you're creating kind of a movement that's not dependent on one person's opinion, but actual power to change things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Thank you so much. I would now like to open it up to the rest of the audience and see if they have any specific questions for Alejandra. She'll be with us throughout the workshop today. So we'll have lots of chances to have more discussions, but any immediate thoughts or responses that anyone wants to express? Okay. Well, maybe we'll move on to the workshop, and then again, we'll have lots of other opportunities to continue the discussion. So now we're going to go into the educator guide that we've written for Alejandra's book. And I think that'll be, Emmy, will you take the play? Okay, so yeah, so Emmy will be presenting on the educator guide that we created.
Okay, awesome. Thank you very much, Alejandra. That was wonderful. Thank you very much for the summary of the book and the reading of the book and your answers. That was great. Thank you so much. So as Marlene explained, we're now going to jump into the educator guide portion for this workshop. And our educator guide kind of has 3 sections. So we have a portion that is a book guide, where there is a lesson plan for the primary level, and there's a lesson plan for the secondary level. And so I'm going to quickly kind of give an overview of what the book guide and some ally lesson plans there look like. We'll then pass it over to Whitney, who will explain some portions of the primary lesson plans, and then back to me for the secondary lesson plans. So all that to say, that the Educator Guide for All and Paratodos provides the necessary tools to incorporate the text into the classroom while exploring the connection between immigration, activism, and human rights. And using this book in the classroom will allow students to co-construct a space of intercultural understanding and exchange and practice compassion. So next slide, please. And so the first portion of our resource guide for educators includes some discussion questions from Paratodos for All, as well as some lesson plans adapted from the University of Minnesota's Immigration History Research Center. Now, Immigration History Research Center has a wealth of curricular resources on its website. We just adapted a very, very small portion of everything that is available there. And if you could please have the next slide. To give a kind of overview of the Immigration History Research Center, it aims to transform how we understand immigration in the past and present. It promotes interdisciplinary research on migration, race, and ethnicity in the United States and the world, and it connects U.S. immigration history research to contemporary immigrant and refugee communities through its Immigrant Stories project. And while sadly we don't have time to go in depth into that lesson plan in this workshop, we do have a little short video that is provided by the Research Center that provides a bit more context on the project, as well as the stories that are contained within it. And with that, I shall mute myself so we can listen to that.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize if I muted myself, I couldn't play the video with sound. I will start it over. My apologies.
My name is Mailea.
My name is Mahmoud Wardere.
My name is Irma Marquez Trapero. My name is Paeso.
My father, Stephen Suchawaki, is a first-generation American.
When my parents came to America in 1987, my father made sure to bring his super hip Sony stereo with him to the new land.
And I was born and raised in Somalia. I was trained to be air traffic controller.
La Virgen de Guadalupe, for me, it symbolizes strong women. I wanted to take pictures with her because this is our last moment together, and also I wanted to take picture with her because I knew I would miss her and want to remember.
The main reason Paul cited for coming to America was to find more work, and he certainly did.
We continue to pave our path in this land and begin to tell our stories, in hope to inspire others to tell theirs. What's your immigrant story?
Wonderful, thank you. As it mentioned there at the end, they are still collecting stories. So if you have one to share, it's in its own way a sort of oral history project. And so, yeah, if you do have a story to share, I would very much welcome you to do that. The more stories we share, the more kind of mutual understanding we can grow within our communities. I'm now going to popcorn it over to Whitney, who is going to explain the first lesson and go through the first lesson in our primary resource guide.
Thank you, Emmy. Okay, so as we've already sort of discussed, there's this consistent theme of art in community organizing and activism. We see this in For All and Paratodos. So we wanted to highlight that in this resource guide. And this next activity that we'll do is one that you would incorporate potentially in the classroom itself, and we'll give you all a shot to do it and see how it feels. So it's been adapted from Learning for Justice, which has an entire series on art and community activism. It's a great resource. I highly encourage everyone to check it out. So if you go to the next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, so what this exercise is it's going to have everyone consider the relationship between art, activism, and community. And this is an example of what you might pass out in the classroom. It's concept map, and if this was a non-virtual setting, you would be able to draw in it and do other mediums besides just writing down words. But for the purposes of this workshop right now, I think what we'll do is we'll have people separate into breakout groups, and you'll be assigned a word. You'll get a link of a concept map just as a visual aid. And we'll have everyone sort of brainstorm the associations with their assigned words. So if you have art, think about things that art makes you think of, other connections, and then we'll come back to the group and share all together. So I think we'll maybe take no more than 5 minutes, maybe 3 minutes in the breakout rooms.
Yeah, so I will break up, I'll do the breakout rooms. Hopefully I can do it without, so we'll do 3 breakout rooms, and then we'll go with breakout room number 1. The core word will be art. Breakout room number 2, it'll be community. And then breakout number 3 will be activism. And Emmy has shared the link to the image of the concept map, so you can reference that. And we'll do it for about, let's say 3 minutes, and then we'll come back and share.
I just want to underscore that it's the second link that I put in the chat box. The first one is the full resource guide. Apologies for that, but it is the second link that is the concept map. And feel free to, write down any words that come to mind. You can do it virtually in the chat box. You can do it on paper, whatever works best for you.
It looks like everyone is back. So does someone from group breakout room 1 maybe want to share some of the associations they had with the word? I think art, we said, was group 1.
I'm going to ask Sandra to express it because I think she had the best idea of what we were supposed to have done.
Sandra, oh, wait, nice.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm doing 2 things at the same time. What I was thinking is with art, if what we were supposed to do was just think how we can tie art to the whole concept of immigration and community, about feelings, emotions, about individual versus collective, about community.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, I think seeing those connections with community also and immigration as well, that will come up in actually our next section. So that's great. Thank you, Sandra. Does someone from group 2, would they like to share? I think it was activism is the word.
I don't think there was a group 2 because the breakout room messed up. So I just put Alejandra in the group 3. So, okay. So I think yes. So if there's anyone from group 3 that wants to share.
For community or activism?
It could be either one, that whatever word that you were assigned, yeah, or that you worked on.
We were in activism, and we just kind of said that, when we hear that word, it kind of brings out other subjects, such as like being a voice for those who are afraid to be, active, whether, they have immigration status or not. It also means like to represent those that need help. And then somebody also said that activism comes with listening, which I had never really thought about, I guess. But I like to think of myself as an activist. So the listening kind of caught me off guard because I'm like, oh, that's right. Like, I'm not just there, to inform other people, but I should also be listening, because even though I can know about a certain subject, I'm not listening to others. So I think that was a great way that came out of it. So yeah.
Thank you, Alma. I think that's really beautiful. That's definitely not highlighted enough, is the art of listening and how important that is. Thank you for sharing. Okay, so we didn't end up having someone or a group assigned to community, I don't think. So what we could do as a community now in this Zoom space is that thinking a bit more specifically about how these words connect to each other. So we could look at specifically at community and art, or how activism informs art, how they inform each other. Even thinking about for all and Paratodos, how did those images inform the content of the book itself? Did it sort of like add a different dynamic to the type of activism we are seeing? And how can art help create community also? If anyone has any thoughts.
I think with community has to do a lot with engagement of like how you can engage everyone in the community, because it does, community means everyone, so it's not just children and it's not just parents, it's like grandparents, uncles. And I think now that I work in public education, it's a lot of these kids that they live with grandparents, or they don't have parents, or like they're being taken care of from their siblings, their older siblings. So I think when community comes to mind, it's like you have to remember that you have to engage everyone. It's not just a certain group, it's not just a certain age or a certain race. So I think it's a lot more, and that's where it can be a little bit complicated, because as educators, it's like, oh yeah, we're trained to work with the kids, but we're not trained to work with like the grandparents, So I think it comes a lot, there has to be a lot of work with the community.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's really wise. Anybody else have any additions?
I was going to say, I think art is such a way of expressing yourself and connecting with other people that can be less scary. I can really tie people together. It can really express a lot of different emotions and what's going on with you or in your community that you might not be able to say out loud. And it's a great form of expression and a great way of getting people to talk with each other and create a sense of community.
Yeah, I think art is a great way to express the things that are sometimes hard to express, like you're saying, and to bring issues to attention. It's a very sort of evocative form of starting conversation. Thank you. Okay, so is there anyone else that would like to share before we move on?
I'll just say one quick thing. I think one kind of beautiful thing that I've seen in kind of in organizing is that it brings communities together in a different way. Like it helps you kind of define yourself as like, oh, this community of workers that now I feel a loyalty to and I feel committed to, working on something together. Or anyway, just it crosses boundaries in a way that that you don't always have in your normal life, and it's just such a beautiful, moving thing to be part of a community of belief, of conviction, of love for each other.
Thank you. That's awesome. Okay, so this is the activity that y'all would potentially be able to implement in your primary grade classrooms. And yeah, that's all I have for this activity. So I hope everyone enjoyed it. Thank you.
All right, so the second lesson plan in the primary resource guide kind of builds upon the first. The first kind of laying the foundation of vocabulary and concepts to allow students to begin to think about more deeply about the role of or how art and community activism can be connected. Now, the second lesson plan focuses on the particular art form of murals. So students will learn how to work and plan collaboratively to get their message of activism across in an artistic way. This lesson allows students to consider how to translate their thoughts into visual form to create a plan for a lasting vestige of their activism. Next slide, please. And so And it has a kind of creativity class discussion. Feel free to answer these in the chat box if you would like, although it's by no means necessary. But some questions to kind of spark thought in your students. So what is a mural? What makes muralism a unique genre of art activism? Why might muralism be a particularly good genre for expressing an activist message? Now we're going to look at, in the interest of time, one mural together. This mural is actually from Albuquerque. So you get a little bit of a view of Albuquerque. Albuquerque has quite a few murals. If we could go a little bit further on, there we go. So 2 questions to kind of ponder as we look at this piece of art. So what messages does this mural convey? How can you tell? And what do you like about this mural? What do you not like? So let's take about maybe, in the interest of time, maybe about 30 seconds, a minute or so. Have a look at this mural. Kind of, there's a lot going on. We're seeing kind of several different little vignettes across the mural. What message do you think this mural is sending? How can you tell? And what do you like about this mural? What do you not like? Take about a minute or so. Feel free to put your answers in the chat box if that is most comfortable for you. If you would like to speak out loud, of course, you can most definitely do that. And we'll take it from there. About a minute. What messages does this mural convey? Okay, let's take about another 15 seconds. Whatever thoughts you had in your brain, maybe finish them off. All righty. So, of course, a lot going on in this mural. Any thoughts verbally in the chat box? Whatever works. Oh, Paula, I see. Ooh, loads of stuff happening in the chat box. So people are mentioning things such as the elements of earth, connection to people who are indigenous, female leaders, harmony with nature, different races, different generations. Excellent. Keep it coming. I can point out something that I saw. I saw quite a few elements regarding water. As I'm sure we're all aware, water rights and water issues in the Southwest of the United States are quite complicated issues. And access to water is a big human rights issue here as well. Oh, sense of caretaking. People are also mentioning rituals, ancestors, water, fire, journey up and down the mountains. Stars. Wow, excellent. All right, let's take about another 30 seconds or so. Again, feel free to share verbally if you would like, or you can keep sharing in the chat box.
Going off from what Alejandra said, in the sense of caretaking, I think, you know, often women are the ones who are in that way of like, oh, women take care of us and they're just such caregivers. But I think sometimes men get to be left behind in that. So I think, you know, with that second question of what you don't like about this mural is that men are not being represented. And, you know, in the Hispanic culture, it's always like the women are taking care of the children, the women are the ones who help us grow. And it's like, yeah, but shouldn't men be included in that community as well? And I think that, you know, sometimes it's a lot on women of this responsibility of we should be the ones taking care of the community, where it shouldn't just fall on us.
Oh, interesting. Yes, thank you very much for sharing that. That is, yeah, very, very interesting point. The people represented appear to be female. And like you say, that goes into kind of issues around caretaking. Who is responsible for caretaking? What does caretaking look like? As well as like the potential connection between caretaking of humans, perhaps on a kind of physical level, human to human, and then caretaking of kind of resources of the natural world, perhaps connection between that as well. I see some people have put things regarding kind of mountains, connection to the earth. Oh, there's a question. What is the meaning of the small numbers on the mural? That's a good question. I actually don't know. Oh yeah, that's a very good point. Thank you for pointing that out. I hadn't noticed them right until right now. They may well be kind of referencing something that, you know, I don't know, maybe perhaps there's a resource for this mural, particular mural already. It's a very good point. Thanks for bringing that up. We will look this up and include it in the revision of the resource guide if we find out. No, but thank you very much, everyone, for your thoughts and for your discussion. Thank you. If we could go on to the next one. Excellent. So when students have discussed murals as community activism and seen some examples, they'll work in groups to plan their own murals. Now, can students kind of then make the actual mural, like actually paint it? Yes, of course. If you are in a location that allows for that, where, you know, there is a wall or even indeed the space to roll out a big sheet of paper and to paint the mural itself, by all means, that sounds fantastic, go for it. If you do that, please send us photos once it's done. Because it'd be great to see that. Now, that being said, the lesson itself does not kind of guide educators in the actual process of painting the mural. The focus of this lesson is particularly on the planning process. So students work together collaboratively to create guidelines on how to work together respectfully, to sketch out a design and to create their works of community activism through art. The planning process itself, the working together portion of community activism is really highlighted in this lesson rather than the actual painting itself. Though by all means, of course, you can definitely take it to that level if you so desire. If we could please move on to the next one. So just kind of some things to think about. What sort of challenges might you face when incorporating these lessons in your classroom? And any ideas on differentiation in content, in process, in product? Any way you might already foresee adapting these lessons for your own classroom? Let's take about a few seconds. Maybe have a think. Again, feel free to share verbally, to share in the chat box, whatever works for you. What sort of challenges might you face when incorporating these guides in the classroom, and any ideas around differentiation? Alrighty. Feel free to keep typing if you are indeed typing. Some sort of challenges that you may face may indeed be things around space, as already mentioned, regarding planning a mural. differentiation ideas. This kind of ties into the first question. Perhaps you're teaching in a hybrid setting or fully virtual setting, or perhaps have a quite large classroom that might make it difficult to plan one mural altogether. These lessons can definitely be adapted for whatever your circumstances are. They could even be completed virtually through kind of an online drawing board tool, if you wanted to go down that route. So let us cavalcade on towards the secondary resource guide. Okay, so having looked at and explained slightly the primary resource guides, we also have a secondary resource guide or a lesson plan for you all to explore and perhaps implement in your classrooms. So in this standalone lesson, students will explore the issues faced by immigrant workers in the United States, the strategies they're using to address problems, and the role organizations, government agencies, and communities can play in ensuring just working conditions. And one of the guiding questions for this lesson is, what are some of the issues immigrant workers face in the United States? Now, this lesson incorporates resources from a thank you, from a online multimedia reporting project by students at the UC Berkeley School of Journalism called Unseen. Now, this particular resource is not focused solely on the intersection between immigrant rights and workers' rights, although this is a theme throughout a lot of the stories that are shared. And thank you very much, Alejandra, for sharing this resource with us and bring it to our attention. It's really, really wonderful. And I fully recommend, if you have the chance, that you have a look. I won't read this entire quote, but essentially this reporting project focuses on issues in labor rights, particularly in California. So California's towering growth has cast a long shadow, and the state's growing population has put a strain on infrastructure and public services. Protections for workers are slipping, worker safety organizations are chronically understaffed, and wage theft is rampant. In a state where income inequality has risen sharply over the past 2 decades, faster than in the nation as a whole, those left at the bottom have fallen further behind. So we're going to do another activity, and I'll explain it in just one second. If we could go to the next slide, please. So our guiding question, and I'm going to put it in the chat box in just a second, is what are some of the issues immigrant workers face in the United States? You may already be kind of formulating some thoughts, perhaps. And again, I will put this in the chat box. So we're able to look at it when we go into the breakout rooms. Before we go into breakout rooms, we're going to watch a very, very short clip by Unseen of a particular story that was shared on that website that speaks to this question and may give you a bit of context, even more context, when you go to answer this question. So I will mute myself and let's watch the clip.
Life gets complicated when we come to this country with all of these laws, with all of these documents that we don't have, with all of these requirements that we never complete. You have to always prove yourself. You always have to prove yourself that you're a decent person, you're an honest person, that you can write, that you can read, and that you know your job. You're invisible. To be invisible that way is really weird. It's really hard to kind of like wrap your mind around it. ¿Cómo está? Well, good morning. I also work at a place where I was in a closed room with aluminum, like dust aluminum kind of thing, and they would not provide me with protection, with masks, with gloves, with nothing, but they would do it when we had an inspection, and we were willing to accept it. Just accepting and just kind of like thinking that you don't deserve, that you're not at that level where your human rights should be respected. You're just begging for an opportunity. And the system makes you believe that you are here because you're not capable. But I mean, we know that's not true, you know, like, let me get a job and I'm gonna save and I'm gonna send my money to my country and I'm gonna build my house and I'm gonna, you know, give money for my kids and then I'm gone. Just give me that little space. And whatever little room you give me, I will create a forest.
Okay, even just a short clip, but quite an impactful one. So as you have likely seen, I put the question in the chat box: what are some of the issues immigrant workers face in the United States? And just like last time, we're going to break out into breakout rooms for about, let's say, 3 minutes. Have a chance to kind of think about this process, perhaps a clip we just saw, and formulate some answers to that question, and then we'll come back and share. Any questions before we break out into those breakout rooms? Okay, I think we're good. See you all soon. Excellent. So let's kind of share out what we talked about. So the question was, what are some of the issues immigrant workers face in the United States? You could have answered this question in the context of the short clip we watched. You could answer this question in the context of your own background knowledge, a mixture of the two, whatever kind of spoke to you. And feel free to put your answers in the chat box or indeed to share them out verbally. So let's go to room number 1. So room number 1, that was Justine, Paula, Sandra, Sumaya, is kind of what came to mind.
This is Paula, and I'm from Iowa. And so there were 2 things that came to mind. One was when the pandemic first hit Iowa, then we have a lot of packing houses, meat processing plants, and agricultural workers. And our governor and certain people in power felt it was more important that the meat and the cattle and whatever be slaughtered and processed than it was to put those workers at the top of the list to get vaccinated. And it wasn't until some people had gotten COVID in the processing plants and died, then and it came to light in the media, then it was addressed. So as always, when the packing houses in Iowa became corporate, as a friend of mine called them, the workers are seen as disposable workers. You know, that if it happens, it happens, but you know, there'll be somebody else that can do it. So that was one thing that reflected around human rights. The other part I was thinking about, and Samaya and I were talking about this, is that we're wondering, why is it that when we have immigrants that are here in this country that have a background, whether they be a doctor, a nurse, a scientist or whatever, why is it that they cannot, or a teacher, even get a job, take some type of a board exam or a final exam that because science is science, math is math, no matter what language you're in, and be able to practice in the United States, especially when we have a shortage. And it seems like there's this barrier, we don't know what it is, but it's preventing those professionals from having a job here in the United States when they're qualified to do the same as somebody that was born and raised here and educated here.
Yeah, no, those are both very, very impactful answers. I'm gathering my thoughts, because the second thing you mentioned, the difficulty of workers and people who qualified abroad using their qualifications here. That's one personally that my family and I have dealt with in various forms. So that is a particularly affecting answer for me personally. So thank you for bringing that up. That is that's a big barrier. Especially when you know, a person, like you say, has qualified and is able to you know, do the job in a country outside of the United States. Surely there should be some way for them to practice here. Thank you for also bringing up the experience of those who work in I'm afraid I probably am going to get the term incorrect, but meat packing plants in the Midwest. That might be particularly an interesting angle for students to explore. So the experience of those working in their own community. And that might be a way of differentiating the lesson and including material that is relevant to, again, a student's own community. Thank you very much for bringing both of those issues up, Paula. Anyone else from room number one? Any answers? Or indeed for room number three?
Can I just add one thing, Emmy? I love your idea.
Yes.
Yeah, I love that idea of really like looking in your own community and like what are the industries represented here, or, you know, the parents of students, like where are they working? And maybe one other step that they could do is not just, you know, what are the problems that they're facing at work, but like who's organizing, you know, what worker centers are there, what unions, like what gains have been made, what are people advocating for now? Because that's also just really exciting to know and to be a part of and support.
Yes, excellent. Thank you very much for bringing that up, Alejandra, as well, to kind of underscore to students that, you know, people are working hard to make things better for everyone. And you know, even in kind of the darkest moments and the darkest aspects of the intersection in between workers' rights and immigrant rights, that there are people working very hard to make things better. Thank you very much for bringing that up. Room number three. Any kind of answers from room number three? Okay. Excellent. If something comes to mind later, feel free to share in the chat box. Let us go on to, and I'll explain kind of a little bit how the rest of the lesson flows. We're not going to do it ourselves, but just so you kind of have an overview. Like Alejandra mentioned, one of the kind of overarching questions, or like Alejandra brought up, I should say, one of the overarching questions asked by this lesson is, how do people, communities, and organizations work together to find a strategy to address a problem affecting immigrant workers? What are the outcomes of that strategy? And then support your answer using written or visual evidence from your assigned story. In this question, as I'm sure you can tell, students are invited to apply and to kind of bring in the evidence that they have explored previously in an answer to this question. Now, the way the kind of lesson is structured is after students have explored the website, they are prompted to work together in a group to answer this question, answer this prompt using the Burger method. And we provide a graphic organizer if you would like to use it. You may well be aware of the Burger method, but essentially it looks at structuring a paragraph like a hamburger, with the topic sentence being the top bun, the concluded sentence being the bottom bun, and all the kind of evidence and explanation in the middle. And then once students have done this as a group, they then are prompted to answer the prompt individually in a written paragraph. Now, options for differentiation. So I'll get to kind of options for differentiation and content in just one second, because we're going to share some additional potential resources that you can use. But in process, students can, of course, work in pairs, work in kind of bigger groups, either groups put together by the teacher or kind of self-selected groups. They can work individually, and also products, depending on the students and kind of what skills you're working together as a class. Students might, answer this question in a PowerPoint presentation, visually through drawing. If you have some students who are particularly hands-on, perhaps even a diorama could be a way of answering this question. And so really the lesson, again, is adaptable to fit both your students, your teaching style, and kind of what point in the year you're at and what skills you're hoping to develop or to help your students develop. Now for differentiation and content, and if we could just go to the next slide. There are loads of resources available online that students can explore to answer this question. So for example, we have a few kind of different news articles linked at the top, some written, some kind of more audio, audio-based content. For example, you may well know of the program This American Life. They put together an episode called The Out Crowd that doesn't particularly talk about workers' rights, and so therefore the question might need to be adapted slightly, but it's a Pulitzer Prize winning radio episode, and it's really fascinating. Just as a kind of, little caveat, if you do decide to kind of differentiate the lesson in this way and use that episode, there are some curse words in that episode and you can find a kind of bleeped version online on the This American Life website. But again, depending on kind of what types of materials your students interact with the best, and also kind of on an individual level, this lesson could definitely be adapted to speak to that. And with that, we are very nearly at the end. I know we're getting kind of really close to time, so we'll close things off quickly. If we could go to the next slide, please. And so a kind of final thought, final thing to discuss verbally or in the chat box again. So in For All, Paratodos, Flor's teacher gives her a green pen because she's sure that writing will help you stay strong and endure. So the green pen represents one's voice to tell stories and advocate for justice. And so then, what do you want to do with your green pen? You can answer this question in whichever context speaks to you. Again, verbally or in the chat box written. What do you want to do with your green pen? Take about 30 seconds. All righty. Any thoughts? Ooh. Answer in the chat box. Write more books and articles, help develop more laws, encourage others to use their green pens. I like that one. That's an excellent answer. Thank you, Alejandra. I can only speak for myself, and I'm not in the classroom at the moment, but when I was in the classroom, I tried my best to help students use their own green pens, like Alejandra has said. Oh, and Paula says, use my green pen to send messages of encouragement to my students and coworkers, and at times myself. Yes, that's a very good answer too. I think we all need a little bit of individual encouragement at times, definitely. So thank you very much, everyone. As it says here, we at the LAII have loads of curricular resources that are available on our website. We also have classroom book sets available, soon to include For All and Paratodos. And we do have a survey. If you wouldn't mind filling it out, I'm going to stick the link in the chat box shortly, and I will pass it on to Marlene.
Yeah, thank you, Emmy and Jasmine and Whitney and Alejandra and everyone for being here. I just wanted to reiterate what Emmy was saying about the survey. We want to ensure that we're providing the resources that work for you and your classrooms. So any feedback is appreciated. We do have the link to the full presentation today, and then all the lesson plans that we referenced today as well. But I will be sending out a follow-up email, including that information as well. And I just wanted to reiterate that we're here to serve our educators, and we really want to ensure that what we're doing is fitting the needs that you all are currently experiencing in your classroom and beyond. And of course, I want to reiterate how welcomed and honored we were to have Alejandra join us today. And we really hope to continue to collaborate in the future and to continue this conversation, because it's something that will never not be relevant. And just to kind of, we really appreciate your time here. So Otherwise, as I mentioned at the beginning of the session, we do have a newsletter. And I think I've received a couple of your emails that aren't already on the list, but you can always visit our website, and you can always just email me. In particular, you can just find my email address on the website. If you have any ideas or any kind of just feedback on what we're currently producing. And I wanted to give Alejandra a chance to maybe say any final words that she might want to include.
No, just to say thank you to all of you. The really important work that you're doing in supporting educators and creating more lesson plans and resources. And I think we really need more on this topic. So you're kind of blazing the trail, and I hope others will be inspired to keep going.
All right, well, thank you so much, Alejandra. On that note, I will let everyone start their weekends, at least here in Albuquerque, it's 5 o'clock, so it's technically a weekend. I hope to see you guys in the next session. So we'll continue to promote our workshops via our newsletter, but again, on our website, where you can